Is the microphone working? Can you? Right, excellent. So the inquiry is resumed. First, a couple of things before we proceed. First of all, just to run through where we are with the programme. Shortly, we'll hear from the applicants' witnesses this afternoon and tomorrow, and then hopefully the council's we complete tomorrow, but we'll see how that goes. It's now a little tighter than it was. Then next week I plan to hear from the vast majority of local residents who've asked to speak on the Tuesday. Then Wednesday morning during daylight I plan to hold a site visit, and in due course we'll talk about the programming for that. And then hopefully on Wednesday afternoon hear closing statements. But both this week and next week we've got a little bit of a run-off time if we need it.
Do you still aspire to, in relation to the Section 106 planning application and the conditions, do you aspire to dealing with those tomorrow if we can?
If we can, absolutely. I originally suggested tomorrow morning, yes. But I think you wanted to finish your witnesses first, did you? Right, it would be good to do it this week though, because then if there are any changes. So what are you suggesting?
Well, I mean, my very strong preference for all sorts of reasons would be obviously to wrap everything up tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you. It's certainly on now. My preference would be to wrap everything up on Thursday, tomorrow. But I do also think it would be very sensible to deal with the 106 and preferably the conditions as well this week. And I'm assuming that if we can't do that tomorrow, then we'll be here on Friday morning doing that. Is
okay.
That right? I mean, I'm just wondering, because otherwise it would go into next week. Now, we'd all much rather, I'm sure, not be here on Friday. So if we roll quicker tomorrow than we're perhaps anticipating with the tail end of my case and with the council's case, and if we do the Section 106 in the afternoon, that'd be great.
We'll see how that goes. Just before we do that, there's one gentleman here, I believe, who can't make it on Tuesday, and I've lost his name, but he's standing up at the back. Do you have a short statement to make? Is it very long? Splendid. Would you like to make it now then, please? Please introduce yourself and carry on. Is it a written statement or?
No, verbally, but
verbally, that's fine.
The phone's been put on to autopilot, so we won't be.
Okay, please introduce yourself and make your statement.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Williams. I'm a local resident of Purley. Been here for all of my life. I'm 50 years old now. I would like to thank the inspector and Purley Baptist for the opportunity to speak. Sadly, due to work commitments, I won't be here for the other residents, so I just wanted to make a brief statement. As I said, a long-term resident of Purley, and I've sadly watched the core of the town be hijacked by the removal of property due mainly to, sadly, the closure of Sainsbury's some 40 years ago, and that's a point that we need to be clear on. This is not 20 or 15, this is 40 years of not having a central component to the town. The town has suffered due to that. Sadly, we have a vagrancy problem. We have quite a large rat infestation. With the flooding that took place a few years ago, that also seeped into the void that is there. So from that point of view, you could say that we need property, but I would sort of like to say that we need an appropriate approach to this. We need a proportional approach to this, a compelling approach. We can't just put something large into an area and call it a landmark purely for avarice reasons. And finally, really, we need to have an inclusive approach. Too long, this space has been left void because it was known that some groups wanted to utilize it for a large profit facility. I'm indifferent to what the reason is. I'm hoping that we will see housing brought into this, and I hope that we will see regeneration, but it needs to be proportional regeneration. We're at a point now where we need to consider that Purley lives or dies with what happens to its centre. Its heart needs to be restarted, and I would like to propose to the Inspectorate that we re-evaluate the plan rather than make a rush to put an ugly structure in the middle of Purley purely for indifferent reasons. That is enough of my time.
Thank you very much. I take it you're opposed to the proposal then. Are you happy to answer any questions, Mr. Ketkowski?
Frank,
I'm sorry you weren't expecting this.
No, that's fine. I mean, the unexpected is always the most interesting, isn't it?
Of course.
So these points obviously have been made by others, will be made by others. If I raise our arguments for each and every person, we'd be here forever.
I understand. I just thought
with no disrespect to Mr. Williams, we'll leave it to our presenting our case and our answers to these arguments.
I appreciate the time.
Not at all. Thank you very much for coming here and giving your evidence.
Thank you.
Any other procedural points before we continue?
Just a bit of clarification. You've made, I think, Mr. Cunningham, who has a written statement in as part of Mr. Pearson's evidence, has made, in terms of things that you've said, 3 appearances so far, yesterday and today. So do I take it that you would like the opportunity to ask them some questions? If so, I'm very happy to tender him for those questions. I hadn't intended to call him as a witness, but
I don't have any questions for him, but I did, as you heard, I wanted to quote what he had to say to put that to the MP.
Indeed.
And so I wanted to know that he was here, and if you wanted to call him to make any statement, I wouldn't object, but I have no particular questions.
Fine, but if you don't have any questions, I mean, I'll take instructions as to whether there's a burning desire on Mr. Cunningham's part to be a witness, but
That was all, thank you.
Good. In that case, sir, I shall start my case proper. Let me just make a note. I'm going to call, first of all, Reverend Dr. James Collins, who's sitting to my right, and so for his evidence, we'll have his proof of evidence and his volume of appendices. I know that there are a few paragraphs that Dr. Collins wishes to read, and then there will be some points he wishes to elaborate orally. So, sir, what I would do without any further ado is to, by taking the beginning of the proof of evidence, you indicate at the very top of the cover, in fact, your various qualifications, and then at paragraph 1.1 of your proof, you explain that you're the senior minister of Purley Baptist Church, and you took up that role in March 2016, and you outline extraordinarily briefly and in summary form the nature of the ministry that you conduct. Are those details correctly set out?
They are, although I should point out that I actually commenced work in the church May 2015, but only became the senior minister and therefore responsible for the overall direction of the church in March 2016.
Righty-ho. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I know that there are some key paragraphs of this proof that you wish to read out, not that many of them, and it won't take that long. So perhaps if we could just do that. So first of all, on this page 2 of your proof, you have a heading, an introduction as to why the Baptist Church needs a new church and facilities. And you have 2 paragraphs on that, 2.1 and 2.2, just in summary of the position. And I wonder whether you could just read those paragraphs out. I understand that you wish to do so. So yes, 2.1 and 2.2.
Yes, Purley Baptist Church is a large church with an active membership who share a desire to see the church grow and engage meaningfully in a local community, providing local services and practical assistance to those in the area, as well as allowing people the opportunity to deepen their spiritual lives. It is a dynamic family made up of people from over 40 nationalities and representing all age groups and a very wide range of backgrounds. PBC has a vision to grow both numerically but also in its impact for the benefits of the town. Already the church has a very large range actually, of projects and ministries to achieve this, as well as a bold vision for the future. Its premises are used by a combination of church members and their families, together with a wide variety of people from all ages from the community. And 2.2, our current facilities constrain and limit our future outreach ambitions, and they are unable adequately to sustain our existing projects and ministries.
Thank you very much indeed. And then if we just move on a few pages to page 6 of your proof, under the heading of the Church's commitment to the scheme, you've got a run of paragraphs, and I understand that you just wish to read out to us 3.2.1 through to 3.2.4. You needn't actually mention the paragraph numbers, so okay. Read on.
Purley Baptist Church is a church with a mission to share the gospel of Christ and to be active in the local community, providing popular services to people in the area. Since, evidently, we are not a development company, it's been a challenging journey we've been on in seeking to make the vision of a new church and community hub a reality, whilst engaging in the realm of large-scale development. The desire to be faithful to that vision, whilst taking a pragmatic and realistic approach, has meant that the church has learnt much over recent years. Our members have been faithful in praying about the various decisions as they have arisen, as well as in exceptionally generous giving. The members have raised over £4 million in order to buy the properties comprising the site. Church has also borrowed against its manses, houses owned by the ministers, in order to secure further finance and debt which currently exceeds £1.3 million. This has enabled us to consolidate a site which was previously in the possession of a significant number of different landowners. In doing so, it allows for a strategic and joined up plan to regenerate a significant part of the town. The church has accepted that some compromises are necessary in such a large and complex development, and this includes the fact that the church and associated facilities are to be about half the original planned size to enable the project to be viable. Additionally, the desired car parking requirement was halved, and a section of the site at the corner of Brighton and Russell Hill Roads is to be given to Transport for London to help bring the roads into better alignment. Under the scheme, the church will also be donating the land at 3 to 5 Banstead Road, I understand it's worth over £1 million, to facilitate the social housing elements and to enable the consolidation of 1 to 9 Banstead Road in line with Croydon Council's strategy to develop these plots on a consolidated basis.
Thank you very much indeed. Then at the bottom of this page you've got a chapter heading, if you like, Community Vision, and within that you have a subheading of Blessing Purley, and if we turn the page, within this run of paragraphs, I understand you'd like to read out 4.1.2 and 4.1.3.
The desire to be a blessing to the community of Purley has been a strong theme in the DNA of the church for many years. The development company 5812 was named after Isaiah chapter 58 verse 12. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. The verse forms the foundation of the vision of the scheme. The desire of the church is not simply to replace its own facilities, but to make provision for the community and bring about regeneration to this section of the town centre. There has been controversy over the social housing element, some suggesting that it's unnecessary or expendable in order to reduce the size of the development. The fact that there is a nationwide housing crisis and that for many people home ownership is unattainable is of deep concern to us. Rather than grudgingly accepting social and shared ownership housing as part of the scheme, PBC embraces this significant opportunity to provide quality accommodation for people of all walks of life within the development.
Thank you. Then if we, on the same page, halfway down the page, there's a heading, Our Current Community Work. You're going to read 4.2.1, but before you do that, can we just open your appendices, because you refer to your appendix number 1, so if we could just have your appendix 1 open, because we'll dip into it when after you've read this short paragraph. So if you could just read 4.2.1, please.
Yes. There is an extensive schedule of current activities and future opportunities in the new development set out in the Appendix JC1. As this shows, most current activities are open to the whole community, and the new development will also enhance most of the existing offerings and, of course, enable development and new growth.
So if we just pause there, if we just take your Appendix 1 just to familiarise ourselves with it, for those who have looked at the archaeology of the planning documents here, a schedule very much like this was submitted as part of the original planning application, but if we can just look at it together briefly, you indicate here, or it's indicated here, hopefully the inspector has it in colour, that green indicates activities that specifically involve outreach to the whole community. Blue, activities aimed particularly at Christians, but available to all. And whites, the white lines, are internal church activity. And we see, I think it's fair to say, a lot of green, and of course, a fair amount of blue. And a lot of community activities and a lot of activities aimed at Christians but available to all. And if we then just seek to understand how this schedule works, if we look at it together on the first page, for example, with the heading of children, we can see that there's a column existing activity, and the code is that wherever there's an E, that means enhanced by the new development. And then in the next column to the right, new activity, and where there's an E, that means enabled by the new development. And if we look through, if we literally just do a page turn looking for E's, do we see a very considerable number of E's, that is to say either existing activities which would be enhanced by the proposed development, or new activities which would be enabled by the new development? Do we find a lot of that in this schedule, basically?
Yes.
Yes, and is that the point?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just looking at this, in one sense, it's hard to imagine that any of the activities wouldn't be to some degree enhanced, but we've tried to sort of stick to where we feel there'll be a material benefit that's evident. But yes, of course, the new facilities we envisage will make a very significant impact on what we're able to offer to our own church community and, of course, the wider community here.
And although the inspector has, as I understand it, been travelling backwards and forwards from this room to the inspector's room that's been made available for him in due course on the site visit day and so on and so forth, I assume that the inspector would be very welcome to inspect the entirety of the building and have a look at your facilities for himself.
Yes, I'm tempted to ask what you would do if I said no to that question, but I'll say yes.
I would call my next witness, I think, if you said no to that one. And then if we revert to your proof of evidence, please, yes. And if we can just move on to a few pages to page 10, and there's a heading there at 4.3, matching our aspirations. I know that you would like to read out 4.3.1 through to 4.3.3, so if you could do that, please.
Certainly. The centre of Purley is becoming a vibrant suburban town, attracting a diverse range of people of all walks of life in which to live, work and enjoy leisure. It has excellent transport links to both London and the coast. It is situated in the increasingly popular borough of Croydon, which is currently benefiting from significant investment and regeneration. We believe it's important that the church remains situated in the heart of Purley Town Centre. We want to continue to bless Purley socially, economically and spiritually, and to build on the foundations we've laid. We're conscious of the changes taking place in the town centre, both in terms of its constituents and their needs. The economy and the composition of the high street have changed dramatically over the years. We hope to realise the opportunities provided by modern multi-purpose facilities.
Thank you. And then if we turn on to page 11, there's a main chapter heading, what if the development doesn't happen? So you're posing yourself that question. You answer that by looking at various aspects of that. So the problems of staying indefinitely here as it is, financial implications of that result, and then over the page at page 12, I know that you want to read out paragraph 5.5.1, which concerns something which I imagine is close to your heart, the impact on the church's members.
Yes. For church members, it's very important to remember this project is far more than a development scheme. It represents a strongly held belief that God has called us to embark on this journey in order to bring about regeneration to our end of Purley. As mentioned above, the development company set up by the church is named after a Bible verse, which is considered to be the spiritual inspiration for the project. The failure of the scheme would understandably require much reflection on the part of the church's membership as we question what God wants us to do. Any new project would inevitably take a considerable time to be realised.
Thank you very much indeed. And then at the bottom of the page, one of the other consequences, if you like, of the scheme failing, you have a subheading, the loss to the community, and over the page at page 13, I know that you want to read out 5.7.4 and 5.7.5. Those would be the last two paragraphs which are read. We'll then turn to a number of matters that we wish to deal with orally. So 5.7.4, 5.7.5.
The present scheme provides an exciting range of community facilities and a centre for community life. Even if a reduced development were found to be viable, it would, I suggest here, be the church and the community facility elements that would most likely suffer, since they produce little or no financial contribution to the cost of the development. It would be a shame if the many years of preparation and planning ultimately resulted in a development with little or no community benefit. And finally, perhaps the group who would suffer most from the failure of the scheme are those who might come to live in the affordable social housing provided by the development. They are unlikely to be represented at this inquiry, but as a Christian leader, I'm particularly concerned for them. Their interests should be given, in my judgment, very serious consideration.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, if we just depart from the written text, so to speak, if that's permissible, and I know there are a series of topics you just want to speak about already for a little while, and so if I give you the sort of pegs, if you like, then off you go. And the first of those, we'll take them one by one. I just wondered if you could just elaborate and say a few words about the initial motivation for the building project. So, if you like, why are we here?
Yes. Put simply, a few points. The current premises are evidently inadequate in three ways, really. Firstly, size. We made reference earlier to the resemblance of the big attendance resembling a Sunday. And on busy Sundays, I mean, this particular Sunday, we had a busy Sunday, there were people out on the streets unable to get in. So to give you some idea, but it's not just the size of Sunday congregations. We have various activities here that are, very much constrained by the size of the premises.
So God is more of a draw even than the local MP.
Yes, I mean, I did want to comment, it's a little bit galling for me to be upstaged in my own church, but anyway, there we are. Secondly, and this is quite a serious problem, the buildings with their age are just not laid out as a contemporary building would be, and it makes the space difficult to utilise in the best possible way. Many of our best spaces actually serve as thoroughfares. So you're trying to run an activity and people are wandering through all the time. In fact, it's been extremely difficult to dissuade church members from walking through this room as we're conducting the inquiry. Thirdly, and in one sense most importantly, in a legal sense certainly, it's a very serious drawback to these buildings. It'd be very hard to get them compliant with contemporary health and safety legislation, accessibility demands, and so on. We've done our best. Most recently, we've invested about £80,000 in the building in a sort of emergency facelift, and obviously that's made an improvement. But we still have significant problems in complying with everything we should do. However, the motivation is really not primarily about all of that. One of the reasons I chose to accept a call to come and serve this church as their minister is there is here a very deeply held conviction about service to the community, and particularly to those who maybe are underprivileged. That is a very strong conviction running right through the heart of the church. I think the previous ministers of the church, make reference to my predecessor Peter Nodding, oversaw a very strong transition in that direction. So that's right in the heart of the church's vision, not simply to provide for ourselves, but to provide something which will be of benefit to others. The vision of the church, of course, is to honour God, but Christianity has always, from its earliest origins, been also about loving our neighbours. And so this bold vision, and certainly by the standards of churches, this is a bold vision, has inspired really a huge amount of sacrifice, both in terms of money and in terms of service, to run all these various projects that we already have started. And it's that vision for our local community, I think, that really drives this project.
Very much indeed. And then next, if you could just say a few words about how long, how much energy and the resources that have been put into bringing forward this project. If you could just seek to encapsulate that, because obviously people like me and perhaps the inspector, we come along and we sit at an inquiry like this, but we haven't been here before. So perhaps if you can just help the inspector with that, please.
Well, obviously I'm a relative newcomer as well, but my understanding is that the project seems to be some disagreement over its earliest origins, but the figure of 30 years is certainly one that has been bandied about. It's certainly been going on for a long, long time. It's anybody's guess how much energy has been poured into it. This morning, quite rightly, tribute was paid to volunteers. The vast majority of the work over these 30 years has been done similarly by volunteers who have offered their energy and, in some cases as well, great expertise, professional expertise, and in many cases without charging. So very, very grateful to all of them. Of course, the culture of volunteerism runs right through the church, so it's no great surprise. I draw attention again to the fact that the vast sum of £4 million has been raised in gifts from members of the congregation. And in addition to that, we have loans both from the London Baptist Property Board and from, again, members, many of whom have loaned us that money on, negligible interest rates. And yes, we're not a good prospect to loan money to, really.
And then, although you've touched on it by reading certain passages from your proof, and we've glanced at your appendix number 1, but perhaps you could just elaborate a few words about the church's vision for the local community and your outreach programs, please.
Sure. I think I've already explained that this vision for the local community is a deeply held conviction, certainly for me and I believe for the local church, and it has spawned all kinds of activities. We detail those activities in section 4 of my proof, and so I won't attempt to go over them all. And we've also already drawn attention to Appendix 1, which lists the potential improvements to existing activities and opportunities for new activities. I just put here, I wish in a way that we could have you all back to look at the church when it's functioning, both on a Sunday and see the sheer diversity and vibrancy of the congregation. And also in the week, we've had to cancel many of our midweek activities for the inquiry. I think no one could fail to be impressed by the various activities that take place here in the week, ranging from our Tuesday morning meeting, which packs our lower hall, where we do a service or activities for older retired people, or on a Wednesday when we have our toddler group and the whole place is overrun with children, with their parents. Furthermore, I just want to say from my perspective, it seems to me that Purley as a place is changing and will change. I think that's completely inevitable. And as a Christian, and I think this would be true of the vast majority, if not all of the members of our church, social responsibility would be an extremely dearly held value. There are around the streets of Purley increasing numbers of poorer people. Our food hub is serving increasing numbers of people. Some of them are coming from Croydon, but I don't think the people of Croydon are of any less value than the people of Purley, obviously. And there is great social responsibility, I believe, it's my conviction as a Christian, for those who have much to act responsibly with what they're given. And I think this is a wealthy area. And whatever we can do to serve those who have less, that to me is a very deeply held value. It's one that we're seeking to encourage in the congregation here. It's not hard to encourage them. And I see the project that we have put forward as presenting opportunities to continue that commitment and develop it.
Indeed. And then, that's speaking about community and outreach programs and facilities, the church's vision in relation to housing, and could you just help us with that, please? Because we know we're putting forward 220 new homes, and of those, 39 would be categorised as affordable housing, to use the planning jargon. So just help us with that, please.
Yes, I mean, I've already read to you a Bible verse. I apologise for forcing you to listen to me speak on a Bible verse. You can come back on Sunday for more if you would like that. But Isaiah 58:12 that I referred to has this reference to restorer of streets with dwellings, and without elaborating the point in any way, I think certainly for a fair period of the project from the church's point of view, there's been an assumption there will be housing provided in this project. As we all know, there's a housing shortage. It's increasingly coming to dominate political discourse, it seems to me. And particularly, obviously, it's notable that young people find it hard to afford housing. And I observe that Theresa May has made it her personal mission to ensure there's enough housing. I in no way wish to make this to stir sympathies in the wrong way, but when I watched the terrible events at Grenfell, I was struck by the fact, firstly, oh my goodness, what's this going to do to our planning application? But you know, the lesson I see from it is that people of all social classes are desperate and have an immediate need for good quality housing. So I'm unapologetic about the housing element and indeed the social affordable housing element. We're very pleased to pay, if the project goes ahead, a small part in addressing that. And because of my particular concern for those who perhaps currently cannot own their own home, I'm particularly pleased about the affordable element too.
Very much indeed. And although you've touched on one or two aspects by reading paragraphs from your proof, I just wonder finally whether you could just, again in culmination, just think about the prospect if, were the Secretary of State, heaven forbid, almost literally, to decide to refuse the application. So what challenges would the church and the community face as far as you're concerned if the answer we get is no?
Well, of course, firstly to say that we unreservedly respect the process, and if the Secretary of State were to decide the project was unsuitable and strike it down, then obviously we would respect that decision, not that we'd have any choice, of course. It would present us with some significant challenges. We'd face an immediate financial challenge. I have been amused at times, really, and occasionally annoyed, if I'm honest, to hear people talking as though this is some money spinner for the church. It certainly is not. Even if the thing goes ahead, we still have much money to raise to fit out the building. In fact, if the church were inclined to make money, the best thing we could do is sell the building and avoid all this controversy. Sell the land, rather, and avoid all this controversy. The reason we're not doing that is because we believe in this project. The immediate financial challenge would come from the fact that we owe, it's all there in the proof, we owe a certain amount of money to London Baptist Property Board in particular, but also have some obligations to other places. And we have to keep paying our obligations down, and we don't have that in the church's ongoing budget. So in fact, even this period of delay for the inquiry has cost us a fair chunk of money that well, I won't go into the details of how we paid it, but we almost had miraculous provision for. Secondly, there is an immediate challenge of the current premises. I'm a director and trustee of the charitable company. I'm therefore, along with the other directors, legally responsible for what goes on in here, and it's at least, we need to keep a very close eye, obviously, on the legality, the compliance of the building with various legal responsibilities, and we would absolutely have to go beyond the facelift if we knew we were here for a longer period of time and immediately assess urgent work that would need to be done. Of course, all of that costs money. In reality, that might well lead to us, we've done some initial contingency planning for that, and whilst we would hope to avoid it, it may well mean that we need to put part or even all of the land that we own up for sale. But alongside those sort of very hard issues that we would face, I think there are some more profound ones that I'd face along with the leaders of the church. And that, firstly, would obviously be the very grave disappointment to church members after such a long period of working on this project. I think I would have my work cut out to avoid folk losing heart. Although obviously we would look to, and I'm confident the church would look to respond in a calm way as possible. It has to be understood the church has walked this journey for a long time. My own conviction is, and I'm sure there will be those that disagree, but my own conviction is it will be a substantial loss to the community in both short, medium and long term. If this project does not go ahead, then inevitably the land will be derelict for another chunk of time, who knows how long. It seems to me, contrary to the evidence produced by the Rule 6 party, self-evident that there would be a big loss to the business community, and that's shown up in the evidence you'll receive, I think, and in the letters that are in my appendix from Purley Bid, who support us enthusiastically. The introduction of several hundred new residents to the town centre, in my judgment, cannot but be an improvement for local businesses, and Purley Bid share that view. And thirdly, of course, loss to the potential residents. But in addition to those three things, the danger, of course, is that in the long term this land will be developed. And if it's not developed by the church, in all probability it will be developed just by a developer. And all those community facilities will go. So the danger is of a loss of a project I really believe in. I mean, when the presentation was given yesterday by Andrew Matthews, I once again felt a great deal of enthusiasm for it. I can picture some tremendous and quite innovative work being done with not a penny in tax paid for it by enthusiastic volunteers who are already demonstrating their commitment to the community. And I just really can't say from my heart enough how much I hope, whilst respecting the process, absolutely, I hope that it ends with approval. In the end, I think over time, if this development goes ahead, there'll be great opportunities that we'll seek to seize, obviously for the church family here, for the wider community, and of course for the many new residents who will be able to live in this great town of Purley. So I commend this project to you. I can't comment on all the intricacies of planning law and so on, but from my lay perspective, I am a lay person for at least this exercise, I commend it to you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. That's the evidence in chief.
Thank you. Mr. King, your colleague Mr. King isn't here, but do you have questions?
Do you want my start? Or would you go after me?
Yes.
If I start, yeah.
Mrs. Hearn's going to ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, we are very aware of the good works you do in the community, and I think we commend.
There's a problem with the microphone. Maybe it's not switched on, or...
It is on, apparently.
Do you want to swap it?
I tried that one. Is that working? Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Well done.
Oops. Sorry. We are very aware of all the good works you do, and I think, as I mentioned, I used to bring my grandson here to the toddler group on Wednesdays, which...
I'm terribly sorry, I can't quite hear you.
No, it's not. It's still not working correctly.
Oh, someone's going to come and help, perhaps, or try again.
Is that any better?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's a lot better, yes.
I think I've mentioned that I brought my grandson here, toddler group on Wednesdays, and it was very enjoyable. What I would like to do is address the derelict site. It's been derelict for a very long time. There was actually a planning application in 2006, and that was for 6 stories. Here. Sorry. 6 stories, 65 flats and 115 car spaces, and this planning application expired in March 2014. But I wonder why this project didn't go ahead, and it would have prevented the derelict site.
It's in my evidence, but I'm going to struggle to find the actual
I can see
place.
reference to the 2006 one, maybe I'm wrong.
To my understanding, please forgive me, I wasn't here at the church when any of this was taking place, so I'm relying on information I've been given. But my understanding is there was one previous project on which we received planning permission, and it never reached the stage of a viable project.
You had an outline planning permission in 2011, which is mentioned in your report.
Yes, that's the one I'm referring to.
But you did have an application approved in 2006?
I know nothing of that, and I can't comment on it.
It's on the council website?
Sorry?
It expired in March, I think it was March 2014.
I don't know anything about it.
The one that expired in 2014 would be the 2011 application. I'm assuming...
There was one in 26.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that there might have been an earlier one.
Oh,
But the
so
one that
maybe it's
expired
later
in 2014 would have been the 2011 application.
Right.
It's the same one. It's the same.
5 years with determination.
It's an 06.
Oh, I see. It's the self-same, so the council... Perhaps you can just clarify. It's the self-same. You're talking about the same permission.
Mr. Morgan, can you help the
I'll
inquiry?
ask Mr. White if I may. So
Okay.
He has the files.
Yeah, the 2006 plan application was determined in 2011, therefore it expired in 2014.
So you're on the same page.
Yeah.
Yes, so there was an application in 2006.
Correct.
But resulting in the permission that the Minister refers to of 2011, it took years to determine it.
It took 5 years to determine
Yes, it took 5 years to determine it, so there you are. So it's the
a very
same
long
thing.
time. And because with the derelict site, because you also refer to the fact that if this project doesn't go ahead, it will become a derelict site again. I think with some of the responses from people who have written in, it does seem a bit like blackmail, a bit of a threat that if we don't give in, there'll be a derelict site for years and Purley will be ruined. I'm not sure if that actually agrees with everything else you've said about trying to rebuild Purley.
Where do you see the contradiction?
You said the site would be left derelict. You also have mentioned that you could sell off the land and make money, but you've also mentioned that you could leave it derelict.
I'm unclear what the question is.
Do you not think that would ruin Purley by leaving the site derelict? Does that not contradict with what you say?
Oh, I see. Well, it's not our intention to leave the site derelict.
But you have said that it may be left derelict. If
Well,
this
as a
planning
consequence of
application-
decisions that are outside of our hands, yeah.
Yeah, but you could also sell off the land, so that's another option.
Well, evidently, yes.
And you've mentioned about there'll be a big loss to business community. But there's been a big loss to the community, I would say, by the site being derelict for so long. I think it could have moved on a lot earlier. You had this application in 2011.
As I said, the reason that didn't work was because there was never a financially viable plan to go ahead. It's not as though we've sat there and done nothing all these years. As you've just heard, before my time, but for years and years we've been trying to build on the land. It's extremely difficult to come up with a viable project.
What about, I know you mentioned the Purley Hub, and the Purley Hub is obviously with the other churches in Purley.
Sorry, Purley?
It's the Purley Food Hub? Sorry.
Oh, yes.
With the other churches. I mean, to have this building so high, with your church facilities,
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. What was that?
Sorry, with your church facilities, 4 stories.
Yes.
We have a very high building, and obviously everyone's agreed that these do not produce money within the scheme. You could possibly communicate with the other churches in the area and have all these things you wish to offer into the public realm and work with the other churches in the area and use their spaces, because they do have spaces. Most of the churches have facilities.
Yes. We do, of course, work very closely with the other churches. We're an integral part of Purley and Kenley churches together. Enjoy very close relationships. I personally meet with the other ministers. Many of the activities we're involved in will take place in other churches. We cooperate together. I mean, it's a question of judgment, how bold your vision is, and believe it or not, it's sad to say, it can be politically difficult sometimes working across different churches. It shouldn't be like that, but it can be.
I mean, I think also you've read out quite a lot about your ambition and your views, and as deeply held as Christians. But I think that it should also be recognised that those that oppose can also be Christians, whether they're your church or another church. I mean, it's not a divine right. By what you're reading out, I think I appreciate that how seriously you take your faith and the prayers that have gone into this. And but I do think that a lot of other people have prayers, and it doesn't exclude because your church particularly wants this. And
yes, I mean, I think your question is, if I can repeat back to you what you've said, that you're saying I shouldn't make the case that somehow God wants this, and anybody who disagrees with it is not just going against me, it's going against God.
Yeah.
I want to make it absolutely clear, sir, that that's not what I believe, nor does my evidence ever suggest it.
I think your evidence suggests, though, that it should be going ahead because you do have faith, and that came across a bit in a lot of what you've been reading out. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, the 5.51, it refers to is far more than a development scheme, but it represents a strongly held belief that God has called us to embark on this journey in order to bring about regeneration to our end of the
Yes. I mean, that's under the heading of the impact on our church. We're not expecting others to feel that way, nor are we commending the acceptance of the scheme on the basis of divine inspiration. What I'm saying there is I'm trying to help the inspector understand the impact upon the members of the church who hold this view. I don't expect others outside of the church to hold that view, nor do I expect the inspector to be influenced in his decision by the fact that we're telling him what we believe God has told us. I'm just simply trying to help you understand people of faith and how they will respond to the disappointment of this not going ahead.
I think also the point that was made by our learned friend yesterday to us and also to Mr. Philp this morning was just because a lot of people want it doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. That's the point that was made. Yes. It's not a planning issue. Mm-hmm. I think that none of this is really a planning issue. I understand why that you want it, and it's good. But I think at the same time, the impact on Purley as a whole is wider than the facilities you want for your church. As admirable as they are, I think somehow the compromise needs to be made. You have mentioned that 4.13, that there's been controversy over the social housing element. In what respect?
Well, the view that was certainly presented to me by local residents and appeared to be the overall position that has been articulated publicly, I don't wish to name names, I don't want to get into that, is initially that both the SIL and the social housing requirement should be struck down in favour of the community facilities, therefore lowering the height of the tower. Remarkable as it might seem to you, and certainly to me, at one of the original open consultations we held here, which we invited the public to come and look at the plans at the stage we were at, I tried, without success I have to say, to ameliorate the concerns of a very angry man. And I said to him, what about this social housing? Do you not feel positive about that? He said, those sort of people should live in Croydon. Now, I'm not for one moment attributing that view to you or any of your panel there, but these views are held. And certainly it was put to me on a number of occasions that it would be better to strike down the sill and the affordable housing, social housing, so that the overall size, massing, height of the tower could be reduced. And this was put in, as it was put into my statement to the council in December 2016, when the decision was made that actually we're unapologetic about the social housing. I believe that you yourselves wish there were more social housing. So
exactly. That's
so we're on the same page, aren't we?
Who was opposing it? And also, all of these emails I've read, there's only one person that's made some similar horrendous comment about the social housing.
Yeah,
but
so
other than that, a lot of people think there should be more.
Oh, that's great. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah, so it's just a strange thing to be in here. I think that's all I've got to say. Dennis?
Can everybody hear me? Right. I'd like to first start off by thanking you for your courtesy that you've given to us at this session. It's been much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Your colleague this morning raised the point that I had said that the scheme to Chris Phelp, that I had said the scheme is excellent. I think that was a bit unfair of him because Chris Phelp wasn't here yesterday. However, I still maintain that. I only have one problem with the scheme, and that is the one of height. You've got an excellent designer. Why can you not raise the other blocks to lower the height of your tower block? In fact, it might even be cheaper because building up on a slab block, as they are, would probably be cheaper than building a point block. Possibly. I don't know. We'd need a QS here to sort that one out.
Can I just, I'm not trying to stop the question being asked, but I just think this is the wrong witness to ask it to. When I call Mr. Matthews next after the Minister, I'll make sure that this question is replayed to him.
Well, I think we'll get this witness to a chance to answer the question,
yes,
because
indeed.
it does. Whilst the detail obviously is one for the architect, the brief presumably came from Reverend Dr. Collins. So let's ask. Here's a question.
Please, I don't have to get a chance.
If he wants to defer to another witness, then so be it.
That's fine.
It's not the first time the question's been put to me. I mean, I can't really comment on that. I have no knowledge of what works and what doesn't. In fact, if you ask me the colour of the carpet at home, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So aesthetics is not my strong point. Perhaps I should go on record as for myself. I'm a resident of Purley, only 2 years. I'm entirely happy with the thought of a tower. It doesn't faze me. It's only a personal opinion at all. I'll just quote something Tarson Flora said to me, the late Tarson Flora, and I'm sure all of us who knew him regret his passing. He said to me his view was that it was far preferable to have one tall element at the front of the site and graduating down to it being a lower height at the end, rather than a sort of block. And I'm only quoting what he told me. I have no knowledge of what would be cheaper and what would be more expensive, and I'm quite happy to leave questions of aesthetic design to the architect.
Yes, I mean what Tarsin said, it was a building of beauty. But as I said yesterday, architects don't always agree. But what we have to...
I think, Mr. King, we are moving on to aesthetics.
We are, yes. I apologise. But I think there is another option for you to be there and still provide everything you wish to do. And I think that the inspector might consider that. in his decision making. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Could I make one more? Oh, to one point. Sorry.
I'll allow it.
It's just, you said that you're no good at aesthetics and you don't know the colour of your carpet, but you also sat there and are saying you don't mind a 6 to 17 story, but maybe maybe you don't mind because you don't know the colour of your carpet. The other thing is...
I thought you were going to compliment me on my tie for a moment there, but anyway, that's worrying.
At one point, you do seem to imply that we do not represent households of affordable housing, but we actually do between us. We're not just, we do care about people buying houses. I have 2 young children who will want to get on the housing ladder at some point. So it does impact us. If we haven't got children, we have grandchildren. So we do care. We do care about homeless people, and we care about affordable housing as well.
Yes. What was your question? Yeah.
It was just we felt that, yes, it was a statement, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was
if you
just...
have statements, then please save them for your closing.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just respond to that? Is that permitted?
Yeah,
You did just say there that I insinuated that you didn't... I wrote my evidence before I knew that you were in existence as a Rule 6 party, so I couldn't possibly have insinuated anything about you.
Right. Can I just ask one follow-up question?
Yes, of course.
If you might. And
I was just, you want to re-examine it?
Indeed. Right.
I just want to check that,
of course,
is there anyone else
sorry.
who's making a statement?
My apologies.
In opposition to the scheme who wants to ask a question? No. Right, now Mr. Katkowski.
Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Re-examination.
So there's just one, because there was some... the point was put to you that it was only one gentleman or one person who might have raised this point about regretting the affordable housing. You explained that the view had certainly been expressed to you that if only the tax, the CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, several millions of pounds was dropped and the social housing was dropped, then the tower could drop down as well. And I don't know whether that came as news to those on the other side of the room, but I wonder whether we can just check the source for that. And I'm going to give you a copy of Mr. Pearson's appendices, our planning witnesses' appendices. I'm going to open it at the right page for you, simply because otherwise you'll be there forever and a day trying to find it.
Can you give me the reference, please?
In his appendices, it's Appendix B, and it is towards the back of that Appendix B, you'll find within that you'll find sub-appendix GC5. So if you go to the very back of tab B, I don't know whether you can do that electronically, sir, but it's all the local MPs' utterances on his website over time, and it's the first of those. If I just hold it up so it looks like that.
Right, hang on. Did you say, tab B? I've got appendix B. Which appendix is it?
Well, within B, it is...
Oh, it's within the Thornset, Mr. Cunningham.
Exactly. It is the very last of those. Appendix GC, so that's Cunningham, GC5.
Okay, I'm nearly there. Which one was it again?
Within GC5, the very first one would do. It's not the only time that he said it, but the very first one would do. It says stop Purley skyscraper, and it's stated
it's after the cases, the projects.
Yes, that's right, sir. After the projects. Should we lend you a hard copy, sir? Would that be quicker? No, not that one, James. Not that one.
Oh, okay, sir.
Oh, page 94
electronically.
That's very helpful.
Thank you. Mine isn't paginated.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry. Take us. It's the very first one. It's the very first one. So this is the then aspiring, or the gentleman when he aspired to be the local MP, so in his running for a re-election as Croydon South MP, so re-election. So if you just look at Mr. Philp's statement there, underneath the picture, by the way, that's not our scheme, but underneath the picture, the penultimate, towards the bottom of the page, the site does need redeveloping. The community facilities would be excellent. If the council drops its demands for the £2 million payment, that's the CIL that you refer to, and the social housing, because there are already community facilities included in the smaller plans for the benefit of everyone, then a much smaller building will be financially viable. Is that the sort of comment you had in mind when you made your point earlier on, that people have said to you, well, don't pay the tax and drop the social housing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do we find Mr. Philp himself making that point in his first public statement on the scheme?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment back on that?
No, you can't. No. So that's
well, I'll lay down the law, but Mr. Katkowski is correct that you've had your opportunity to ask questions. But as I say, if you want to make, as long as it's not new points, if you want to make something in your closing submissions, then that's absolutely fine.
good. Thank you very much indeed. So did you have any questions?
I have a very long list of questions. I'm hoping that as a result of what Mrs. Hearn and Mr. King have asked, that we've reduced it a bit. But yes, I do have questions.
Thank you.
First of all, my understanding is that, like the MP, you're not an expert witness.
Yes.
So I will bear that in mind. Do you understand my role in these proceedings? I tried to outline it a little bit at the beginning, that not only do I need to hear evidence, but I have an inquisitorial role.
Sure.
So while the local opposition has been helpful, I have a duty to test yours and other evidence. In particular, I need to recommend to the Secretary of State what weight to be given to various assertions.
Sure.
And so I need to do that. And I say that because please don't take my questioning as meaning that I prejudge matters in any way. I simply want to understand it, and if I can report to the Secretary of State that I've asked questions and they've been properly answered, then from whichever side, that allows me to recommend more weight is given to it. Now, there may also be questions that, as with the earlier one, you may say, well, actually, I don't know, would defer it to the professional witness behind you.
Sure.
Please do that. It also gives them notice of the questions coming up. Now, first of all, you talk about, I put the reference 433 in your proof, that the economy and the composition of the high street has changed dramatically. How so, and how does that affect the community facilities?
Yes, obviously, to some extent, this statement is reliant on what I've heard people talk about, because I've only lived in Purley for 2 years. But I've heard people on all sides of this debate recognise that the high street has changed a great deal. It seems to me, firstly, evident, and I guess when you have your stroll around the town, you'll see this, that there's an increasing number of vacant properties. Additionally, the picture of the town is increasingly one of businesses falling into 3 or 4 basic categories. It seems to me there's a great deal of there's some nice restaurants, but there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of estate agents, and there's a good number of charity shops. All of that indicates to me the fact that there is people lament the loss of 1 or 2 kind of more boutique shops, 1 or 2 more specialised independent outlets. And speaking to business owners, they recognise that recognise the challenges of continuing in business with a sense of deterioration over the high streets. And I think that my impression is that that's pretty uncontroversial across both sides of obviously the reasons for that we might differ over, and certainly the potential solutions.
And the second part of my question, how does that affect the community facilities?
Well, we feel that giving people a hub in Purley so they can come and be right in the heart of the town and involved in all sorts of we hope creative and interesting and community building activities. It would seem a relatively short jump to thinking that they might see Purley Town Centre as a place to come, And if they're here, then go and use other parts of the local economy.
So you're saying that you think the development would attract people into Purley?
Certainly hope so, or else it wouldn't have achieved its purpose, really.
Okay. Well, it's important that I report that. Now, then this is 531, you say the current facilities are seriously inadequate and the changes necessary when... let me just turn up the reference so I understand it. Right. No, I think that one it's been dealt with already. Now, most of my questions are going to relate to community facilities and affordable housing. So that you know that's where I'm going. That's what I'm looking at. Now, although it's not been referred to in the, it's got a bit loud. In the opening, the National Planning Policy Framework, which we've heard about already, there are three references, in fact, but two relevant ones to places of worship. That's 70 and 171. Now, although it's not in the opening or Mr. Pearson's evidence, in the same breath as community facilities, they refer to places of worship. But it's not clear to me that policy is saying that they're equivalent, and this is something that I'll be asking the planning witness in due course. So what I want to do is try and unpick which of what you claim are community facilities are actually benefits for the community per se, and which are benefits that are more for the church. Has that one died, do you think? Okay. Can everyone hear me now? Some nods at the back. And which ones relate to the church?
Sorry to interrupt you, but you remember Appendix 1 actually does this job?
Exactly. I was just about to take him there, but I wanted to explain in advance why because he's not a professional witness, why I'm doing that and exactly what I'm trying to interrogate. So what I'd like to do is take you through your 3 pages, your 3 coloured pages, and just actually tease out a little bit more detail.
Sure.
First of all, the actual use of the hall, the replacement to this space. Now, would that be available to everyone in the community? Would it be available to people of other faiths or none? Would it be available to other churches in the area? How would the actual hall space work?
Yes, I anticipated this question, funnily enough, so I rehearsed it at home this morning.
Right. You don't have to confess that, but it was probably a good thing to do.
This is a congregational church, and so it is important for you to understand that, well, leading churches, I asked a civil servant recently, I hope you'll allow me just a very brief digression. I asked a retired civil servant recently who, I can't remember quite what he specialised in, who then subsequently become a minister. Which of the 2 jobs was more demanding? He said, well, they're both like herding cats. Before I find I'm terminated in my employment here at the church, leading a church is a very challenging role, and leading a church into change can be a very challenging role. We are a congregational church, and that means that the policy of the church is determined ultimately by the whole membership, not by me or even me and the trustees. We have a legal responsibility, directors. But in reality, big decisions need to be made and brought to the whole membership. We have agreed that all of the facilities will be, with the exception, I think, of one or two, and forgive me, I'm not au fait with the absolute minutiae of the detail, but some of the facilities may be designated for commercial use. I think there's a possibility in shop, retail premises amongst it. But all of the other facilities we have said will be available to the local community. Our one stipulation is that it's in line with our ethos as Christians. And inevitably I can see my path over the next few years, should this be agreed, as strewn with discussions about what Christian ethos means with my congregation. At an extreme, if a local branch of the Satanists opens, I think it highly unlikely we would allow them to use our premises. On the other hand, and I think you ask exactly the right and what are challenging questions for us, would we allow people to come and practice other faiths? I think the honest answer to that is no. And I just point out that neither would they allow us to come into their premises, generally speaking, and practice either. And I think my experience has been, when speaking to people of other faiths who want to use our premises or in previous churches, they're broadly accepting of that, because they understand the reciprocal issues it would raise for them. One question in my mind, and I'm speaking now personally rather than the church, is whether we'll allow alcohol on the premises. I think probably, my guess is, most of the church are thinking we want to be progressive, and so we might. I mean, nonconformists have a long history of teetotalism, but I'm personally not teetotal, but my personal vision is that we would have a lot of activities in these premises that would pertain to health, well-being. And part of my pastoral experience is with people who struggle with alcoholism. And I'll have this debate with the church should the premises be erected, but I personally feel perhaps a space in the town where those who struggle with addiction to alcohol know they're safe and that they won't come in the way of temptation might be a good thing. But I might win that, I might not.
Okay,
Does that give you sufficient indication of the sort of...
It gives me a start, and
Sure.
It's very fair of you and very helpful. What I will be doing later this week, and your advocate has tried to push it off till the end of the week, till after the witnesses have been heard, but what I will do later this week is look in some detail at the legal agreement, because what's in that, and I don't know how familiar you are with that at the moment.
Not chapter and verse, but I'm quite happy to... I have looked at it, and it was some time ago. If a copy can be provided
please
for
don't
me.
refer to anyone else at the moment.
No, okay, sorry.
What I'll be looking at is not taking anything for granted. In other words, whilst I have no reason to doubt what you're saying and it's not been challenged, I will be looking at the nitty-gritty, and my understanding is that there's going to be some sort of plan that will manage it and the community involved.
Yes, I believe it's called the Community Facilities Management Plan.
It is, exactly that.
So it's Schedule 5.
It is. I have looked at it. Yeah. But we'll come on to it in more detail. So I'm just going to ask the questions about the principle of it. And so what I want to do now is talk through the various activities and see what your understanding is of to what extent they would be open to the community or otherwise. Sure. And then in due course compare that with what's actually written in this draft management plan in what will be the legal agreement. Yes. So that's where I'm going with this. Okay. So we've talked about the hall, and that's very fair, and I don't think that's different to what I expected, to be honest. So if we could turn up your Appendix JC1. If you could take me through the just see where I got to. If you take me through and tell me which activities would use which space?
Okay.
So the blue and the white are essentially Christian or internal led. So I'm interested in the ones that could be argued to be completely community.
Yes.
So if you could talk me through the ones in green and say where in the new building they would be accommodated and how they would.
I'm completely unable to do that. I mean, there's a whole range of rooms. I haven't for 1 minute gone through all the plans and looked. I mean, there'll be some of them that I'll have an idea, but I think it'd be extremely difficult for me to position every single one of these for exactly which rooms.
Okay, well, maybe we'll save that for looking at the legal agreement.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I think I counted up there are something like 83 existing activities, which if that's right, that's probably quite an achievement, but that's for others to judge. And then 17 new. So that's an increase, but it's only an increase of about 20% or something. Is that something then that the Secretary of State should give considerable weight to, just an increase in 20% in community uses?
Yes, probably shouldn't compliment you on the question. I think it's a good question. And it's one for us to think about, I think.
At the beginning, I nearly said that I need to play devil's advocate, but I thought I'd better not do that. And given your answer to the use of the hall, I think...
And yet you've slipped into it. No. I draw your attention to the heading of this, which is current and potential future activities, and I hesitate to add my particular understanding of the word potential, given the debates that have already taken place, but inevitably this is speculative. I have no idea who's going to turn up for church on Sunday, let alone what army of volunteers or otherwise I'll have available to me some years hence. And in church life, activities are undoubtedly inspired, motivated, staffed in the main by volunteers, and therefore I have very minimal, well, that's not quite true. I certainly have restrictions on what I am able to say we will or will not definitely do in a few years' time. And I think if you'd have asked the previous minister here or asked me in my last church, what do you think the church will be doing in 5 years' time? I think it's only fair to point out you're only ever giving a relatively educated guess. I have deliberately restrained what we've said here because I don't want to promise more than we can deliver. You're quite right to say that if this is built, and I don't know how many years it takes to get built and then for us to get settled in, the first two things I'd like to say about that. One is, I think it will be a huge management challenge for me and the small number of other ministers and staff we have here in the church and the leaders of the church to prepare the church for the massive change that will come their way if this goes ahead. And I relish the opportunity but recognise the challenge of making sure such an excellent suite of community facilities are used to their maximum. I think in answer to your specific question, if in 10 years we'd only managed to add 17 new activities, not necessarily that the quantity of activities is the key thing, I'd say the quality of the activities is at least equally important, I personally would regard that as a disappointment. But I'm trying in what I've put here to be moderate rather than, give you an unrealistic or unachievable, though impressive, list of activities, potential activities.
That's very helpful. As I said at the outset, what I need to do is report to the Secretary of State what I consider should be given in terms of weight to the benefits of the community uses.
Of course.
I understand your difficulty, so what I'll do is I'll be looking at that legal agreement in some detail. Will you be around when we hold that discussion?
I'm intending to be here throughout the process.
Excellent.
So yes.
That would be helpful. Okay. Now, so moving on just to one or two one or two more detailed points on uses. The Purley Cross Centre in the High Street.
Oh, yes.
Why would you want to move that?
On your visit, perhaps we can enable you to get inside it, and
right.
Perhaps the answer will become self-evident.
Okay.
It's a very restricted premises, well off the beaten track, and actually our current intention, I should say, is to rename. I know it says on the architect's drawing Purley Baptist Centre. We prefer, and in negotiations with the council, have come to an initial proposal that we will actually call the whole of the community facilities the Purley Cross Centre, which give a hint at our Christian identity in the use of the word cross, but obviously the place is Purley Cross. And really to see all of our community activities coming under that rubric. So it'll be a massive change really from the existing community and information centre with an increasing number of actual offerings to the community there to repositioning it in obviously much enhanced premises and using it as the label under which we offer to the community all of the facilities that are there.
So you're saying two advantages, one the location, the other the quality of the premises.
Undeniably, yes.
Which is the more important of those two?
I'm not sure I can answer that without doing some analysis. I know that we looked recently, because our lease is coming up for renewal on the current set of buildings for the Purley Cross Centre. We looked at whether to move, or we looked at looking at a couple of the vacant sites, and some discussion was had as to whether if we moved it to the Brighton Road we might get increased footfall, and some information came back to say, well, most of the people who come are not coming because they're just passing, so there wouldn't be much merit. And I pointed out the somewhat obvious point that may be because they can't find it. So it's very difficult without doing some analysis to find out the answer to the location. I just think they're both really important, and I find it hard. I mean, the last thing I'd want to do is generate huge numbers of visitors to terrible premises. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not answering you very helpfully.
No, you're doing very well. So in terms of the existing Purley Cross Centre and what goes on there and the other activities, if the Secretary of State decides to turn down this application, would you stop supporting those existing uses?
The Purley Cross Centre you're talking about?
Well, all the activities that go on both there and here.
Oh, no, of course not. No. We would endeavour to go on serving the people of Purley. However, I would like to just draw your attention to the fact that, I would very much hope people listening would not see this as blackmail. I've made a genuine attempt to answer the question, what happens if this doesn't go ahead, because that's obviously a consideration for the Secretary of State. And it is undeniable that one possibility is we could do what many churches have done, which is move out of civic centres and buy. Typically, churches tend to buy warehouse premises because there's much less political controversy over their use, and turn them into churches, much more easily. And I mean, that is only a possibility, and not one that we've investigated at any length. And we would be very sad to do that. But one thing's for sure, we'd have to do something about these premises. I mean, I feel my responsibility to ensure that we're operating in better premises very strongly.
Okay, my questions probably aren't in the most logical order, but I'll ask you to bear with me. You talk about the use of the hall. My understanding is the phasing of the development is that the south site would be built first, with the majority of affordable housing provision in that, and then this site would be redeveloped.
I think it's 3 phases.
Three, right? Okay.
My understanding, and I'm offering this. Very much
I had a lot of papers to read in a very short space of time, so you're probably...
My understanding is that the first phase is the south site, the second phase is the island site on the other side of the church premises, so the church remains standing.
Right, yeah.
And then when those premises are there, and obviously this is a massive part of, it's a big part of the appeal to the church, because the risk of allowing this building to be demolished before we have somewhere secure to move into.
So the new church hall would be built before this is demolished?
That's my understanding, yes, for sure.
You might want to check that, but yes, I'm sure you're right. That's what would make sense to me.
As far as it's possible within my limited understanding of these things, I am sure that that's true.
Good. Well, that's what I expected, but I missed it somewhere in it. Okay. Phasing. So I've dealt with those. Now, you give some explanation of why the previous scheme was unviable. You do that in one paragraph, 3.1.4. And this is the question Mrs. Hearn was asking you about. It's just the one paragraph there. Is that the limit of your understanding or explanation of that?
I think the only thing, I've spoken to a number of people from the church about this, and I think it's fair to say it was something of a painful episode in the life of the church, and I'm just being candid with you, and I might get in trouble with this with some of my members, I don't know, but my impression is, and having spoken to different people, that there was also an element of personal difficulty between various people involved, and something of a breakdown of trust. I don't think I can say any more than that, because anything else would be just privileging one set of views over another. But my best understanding is, and obviously it predates me, is that it was quite a difficult episode for people in the church, and there was an element of breakdown of trust as well. But it's evidently the case that, and the central issue perhaps around which those difficulties occurred, was that there was no viable scheme ever established.
And was this the scheme whereby the church hall would have been twice the size that it is now?
My understanding that is correct, and furthermore, my understanding is that when we initiated discussions with Thornset, we were still aiming at something that size, but reality bit.
Okay, thank you. Now, coming on again to the planning obligation document, there are currently 6 signatories to that. When the development's complete, who would own the buildings?
Who would
own?
I was presented with a glittering array of the different legal structures that were in place. I can't answer that. I mean, obviously we can find it out and give you the accurate information, but I don't know for sure. I believe it will be owned by 5812, but that may be incorrect.
Right. Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about 5812. It's a charitable organisation, is that right? But it's also limited companies.
Yes.
Is that it? Okay. So who owns that?
Who owns 5812?
Yes.
Well, it's a charitable company, and it's run by the directors of the church, which is also a charitable company.
Right. Okay. And
but the directors of the church appoint a management committee who oversee the operation of 5812.
Right. Okay.
Ultimately, directors of the church, of course, are accountable to the church meeting. That's our congregational church government. So they can either elect or dismiss trustee directors as they wish.
Right, okay, thank you. That would probably taken that as far as I need to go at the moment. Now, you mentioned a moment ago that you could do what other churches have done, which is sell up and move to a warehouse or something. What about simply developing the south site for your church and allowing the whole of this site to be developed for housing? Surely a housing development in a prime location in the centre of Purley would be a viable concern.
I can't answer that. I've never given any attention to that proposal.
You haven't? Right, okay, that's fair enough. The question of affordable housing, and I noted what you said about wanting to include it, and you describe it as a generous provision. But in fact, the provision would be 18% affordable housing, and depending on which policy you're looking at, it should be either 35 or 50%. Now, I could go into the viability documents in some detail, but I prefer not to. My understanding is the long and the short of that is that what makes it unviable to have more than 18% affordable housing is the extent of community provisions. Is that your understanding?
Yes, I believe that the level of affordable housing in the documents, in the plans you referred to, the view was it was offset against the community facilities. Yeah.
So if there were fewer or less area of community facilities, there could be more affordable housing. Would that be right?
Well, I mean, it would seem to be right, wouldn't it? But I've never, in my professional experience, ever considered such a question, and I have no training with which to answer it, but it seems right.
No, but in terms of this balance, which I have to report on, what that says to me is that you're putting the wishes and needs of your church and congregation and the community facilities that are serving Purley as higher than the need for affordable housing.
Yes.
Is that fair?
I suppose it feels slightly galling to have the question put in that way, given that up until I saw the documentation of the Rule 6 party, I don't remember anybody challenging me along the lines that you've said. In fact, the challenges were coming in the precise opposite direction. I was defending the provision of social housing. On the other hand, look, I'm in favour of social housing and people having their housing. So, yes, I mean, some calculation, I suppose, needs to be made, and it goes back to viability as to what can be accommodated on this site. And I suppose I feel, apart from stating my principled support for it, as I'm understanding it, the questions here are around viability. And sure, I mean, if you start taking away church and community use, maybe you can reallocate that. We have already compromised 50%. Starts to get to the point, if it gets sufficiently small, why would we want to invest all this money to end up with something that doesn't meet our aspirations, I suppose, for church and community?
Well, again, I would prefer it with the opposition that was asking these questions, but sure. This is my duty. Yes. The rebuttal to that answer would be that you would want to clear your debt, the debt you told me about, and that you would want a larger hall, which you don't want to pay for. You want the development to pay for. So let me have your thoughts on those two, please.
So you're saying that if we...
Well, one, you've told me that the church has debts, so what you're hoping to gain through this development is enough profit that you would clear that debt, as well as satisfy the developer and provide yourself with a larger hall.
No, that's not, well, it's not quite how it works.
Well, that's why I'm putting it to you.
Yes, sure.
So explain.
The development agreement will enable us to clear our debt should the project go ahead without any further giving. We will need to attract giving in order to fit out the church. Obviously, the financial challenges that you referred to really hit us if the project doesn't go ahead. I'm not used to thinking about such things, but it seems to me unlikely that if the project goes ahead, we will face financial challenges that could be mitigated by making the community facilities smaller and making the provision of social housing larger. In any case, in order to achieve that, presumably this current project would fail and the immediate financial challenges would kick in. So it's a moot point, is it? I don't know.
Okay. Let's start with that one. Last few questions. I've managed to scratch a good many of these. I think you essentially told me earlier that retail is in decline in Purley, but there's a shop proposed, or a retail unit proposed in this unit. Are you confident that would be let?
I think there's some discussion about a potential tenant already, but I'm not sure of that. So I'm certainly don't want to name them in case I'm wrong.
Okay.
Yes.
If it did let, does that not mean that it would be detracting from other parts of the town?
Would you mind, Terry? I mean, frankly, this is a question to put my planning witness.
You're right.
The retail floor space we propose is a considerable reduction on the retail floor space we're going to knock down for this scheme. So there's your answer, sir.
That's helpful, Mr. Katkowski. No, that's the end of my questions. Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Collins.
I'd like to ask some follow-up questions.
No, absolutely not.
Given your inquisitorial role,
I was about to invite you to.
I'll do my re-examination after your questions in the future.
I was about to invite you.
So a number of the points you've raised, for example, I'm just going to put my marker down. The inference in your question about looking at this scheme and saying, well, if you reduce the community facilities, you'll be able to have more affordable housing. I do not accept that that is an appropriate approach under the various planning policies. You look at the scheme as it is, you look at its viability and see how much affordable housing it can bear. Just to put my marker down. So if your mind is going along that channel of thought, I'm just putting my marker down. Yep. Beware, because it's completely the wrong approach, but I'll deal with that through my planning witnesses.
Well, I think it's right that I should be asking that question, and you know, I look forward to hearing what your planning witness will say about that.
Indeed, so.
Good that you've I don't criticise you at all for saying that.
Yeah. I'm just seeking to put my marker down, sir.
Yeah, no, that's...
Before a hair starts running, you see.
No.
But the one point I did want to ask this witness about, because I think it does fall within his remit, so to speak, rather than being more appropriately for another witness, is to go back to your appendix number 1, if you might. So I think you said that in looking at the greens, you counted a number of activities, and there were 17 new and all that business and so on. So what I just want to do is to look at this in another way, because you remember the gist of the inspector's questions was, well, there were, if you like, I'll insert the word, only 17 new activities, and that's that was his word actually, only 20%, so shouldn't that potentially diminish the weight of the point? So if that sort of point is going to be raised, and it has, if we look at the schedule, please, the green lines, as I understand it, are, as per the title, activities that outreach the whole community. So this is everyone, whoever you might be, so to speak.
Well, I think, if I could just clarify that.
Yes.
All of the activities, including the ones primarily aimed at Christians, are open to absolutely everyone.
Well, I was going to come to that, yes. But it says blue is aimed at Christians but available to all.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just focus on the blue, on the green. We could do, and I would do it, I can do it in a few moments' time actually, but we can do the blue as well. But just taking the green, because that's what the inspector, I think, was particularly looking at.
Sure.
I mean, there, if we count the number of lines, we get 63. There are 63 green lines. Take that from me. Everyone can do this for themselves. Although I have counted them 4 times. So I hope I've got it right. 63. And if we look at the headings for the existing activities enhanced by the new developments, that's where there's an E. Mm-hmm. We get 25 enhanced, existing or enhanced by the new development. And if we look at new activities which are enabled by the new development, we get 16. I got 16, I'm not sure where the inspector got 17 from, but anyway, 25 plus 6...
I raised this because I never trust my own arithmetic.
Jolly good.
I always like other people to do it for me.
Thank you. 25 plus 16 is 41. Mm-hmm. 41 over 63 is in the region of 2/3. Mm-hmm. So let's play the point that way. What would you say to the inspector about a project which, in relation to existing and new activities, enhances and enables 2/3 of the activities aimed at the whole community? What would you say to the inspector about the potential benefit of that? 2/3.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it speaks for itself. Forgive me, as a church leader, I'm reticent about promoting ourselves in the wrong way.
I'm going to say to you now, I hope not too inappropriately, don't hide your light under a bushel. So
yes, if you just leave the scripture references to me, that would be appreciated. Jesus, it seems to me, clearly gave us the impression that all our service should be humble, and that's why perhaps I'm reticent. Well, it's one reason, and because I really just want to be very honest and not try to paint some utopian picture of life in the new premises. But yes, I mean, look, it's hard to imagine that any of our activities would not be enhanced in some way. I think if you looked at the premises that we currently have in operation, you would see children playing in rooms that are not ideal, and the thought of actually, in my last church, we built a new building. The massive improvement in the quality we were able to offer in contemporary premises, it's hard for me to put into words, and the church immediately experienced a lot of growth, and it inspired a lot of new activities. It has a material change in the social dynamic of the church. The list of advantages is hard to exaggerate. So I'm absolutely confident that despite being actually, I think, proud of what we currently offer, the majority of cases by people who derive no benefit whatsoever from it, in some cases like myself, people who derive very moderate benefit from it, then I'm absolutely confident that we'll benefit the community hugely, even if the benefits to me continue to be moderate.
Thank you very much indeed. That's the only follow-up question I had. Thank you, sir. I'll move to I noticed the time. If you wanted a short afternoon break, it would be a good point.
Absolutely. Let's adjourn until 25 to. The inquiry is adjourned.
Thank you.